Okay, we are live with Jason Cow and Jen Cow and Nadim Ahmed Cow. What's the last? What's the? No, Nadim's last name doesn't also include Cow. But I'm just thinking, what is the nationality of that last name?
Chinese.
It's Chinese. You hesitated. You had to think about it for a little bit.
Well, it depends. What you want, the technical? What kind of Chinese?
Oh yeah, sure, yeah.
It's half from Hong Kong and from Taiwan.
Half.
So Taiwanese and Hong Kongese.
Okay.
Which is Chinese, just a different derivative of Chinese.
And then your parents are from Hong Kong.
My mom's from Hong Kong. My dad's from Taiwan.
Okay, yeah, that would make sense how that works. And they met where?
In Hong Kong.
And then you were born here in Canada?
Yep.
So they left Hong Kong.
Yep.
To start a life here.
Yeah. So they met each other over in Asia, but then over the time they both decided to move to Canada.
But they weren't together then.
No, they were.
Okay.
But it was one of these weird ones where they weren't really together at the same location.
Huh. Long distance relationship. They wrote letters to each other.
Yeah.
No way. Oh my God, it's a love story.
It is.
You were a love child. Holy smokes. And then Jen, you're born in Canada?
Nope, born in Hong Kong.
Born in Hong Kong.
Both my parents are from Hong Kong, and I moved here when I was 4.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, geez. I was, we're talking this is kind of making me think of Cherry. Do you guys know Cherry Chan?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
She was telling me how I think it was her mom, like swam from China, I guess that would be the mainland side, to Hong Kong. Is this possible? And that some guards were kind of like walking above her while she was still in the water at some little bridge area where she was coming out of the water. Just kind of petrified about the whole situation. And I'm just thinking about what so many of our parents went through. Your parents have stories, my parents have stories, Nadim, your parents have stories, and then being born here in Canada, it seems so simple to me.
Yeah, I feel like we live in a bubble, and unintentionally, I think our parents wanted us because they wanted us to have this good life, right? They had their struggles, they came here with barely any money in their pocket, and they want us to have this opportunity. And we're here, we've got all these opportunities, and it's very easy for us to just sit there and oh yeah, this is great, and we're trained to feel that way, I think, and we're taught to feel that way. You got this great life here. You got clean water. You got clean air. You don't have anybody, trying to bomb the house beside you, right? We live in Canada. We live in a bubble.
Yeah,
it's a great little bubble. It's easy for us to get comfortable, right? So when there's a struggle in front of us, when there's something ahead of us that we need to do, I feel like we need the extra push because we're almost trained from the get-go to be comfortable.
Yeah.
And that's I don't know.
It's naturally for our parents to remove friction in your lives, right?
Yeah.
As parents, we want to try to remove as much friction for our children. But, as a part of a unintentional consequence, sometimes that makes it too easy where some kids or, even for friends in our age group, we might have that kind of mentality of saying, hey, it's easy. It's supposed to be easy.
Trying to protect your kids at all times. Don't let them have that friction. So that's interesting that we kind of went down this path a little bit. And Jen, I'm totally agreeing with everything you're saying. So when you guys, how old are your kids right now?
6 and 4.
6 and 4. What goes through your mind then? Because sometimes I find with my kids who are 15 and 19, I want them to have struggle.
Exactly.
I want them to have struggle.
Yep.
And sometimes over the most ridiculous things, if there's a problem at my son's student rental, it's I'm happy because they had water. One of the sump pumps went, there was water coming into the basement. And they're they're all freaking out oh my gosh, there's water. I'm well, I don't know. Where's the water coming from? Did you reach out to the landlord? What's going on here? And I and not that that's a huge struggle by any means, but I want these things. And I wonder sometimes if maybe raising kids in Canada, we just don't do that to our kids enough. And is that the system in Canada's fault because we don't have those opportunities, our fault as parents, or it's just no one's fault, it is what it is? But it kind of goes through my mind a lot. I just want them to be resilient and resourceful. And it's tough, I think, to teach those kinds of qualities when you're raising kids in Canada.
Yeah, we're in an environment where we're meant to be comfortable.
Yeah.
Again, that's what our parents wanted, right? And that's where we are. Again, it's like you said, find the opportunity to go through these lessons learned. Like, you know, our parents came here, English was their second language. I can't imagine like trying to navigate through the government policies, how to buy a house, how to do anything.
Get a
like,
driver's license.
yeah.
You know?
And how do you figure that out? Yeah. How do I renew my license sticker? You got to go. You got to go online, find the link, read the paragraphs. You know what I mean? Just to go through those simple things we take so much for granted because we understand it so well. Could you imagine being in their shoes? Right? We don't. I haven't, like, maybe I feel like I haven't experienced that type of struggle.
Yeah.
Because I grew up in this, you know, great place.
I got
Canada.
a little bit of a taste of that. I took my father to a family wedding in Croatia this summer. And with all the COVID stuff we had to go through, he's 82. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have the app on his phone, whatever is it, the ArriveCan app or whatever Canada has now. He doesn't have the knowledge to pull out an app to figure out the testing locations and to do it within 48 hours. And I was just thinking, how did he make it in Canada? Because without me right now, he's not getting back home. Like, he's not getting back home. Like, he's going to be staying in Croatia. Yeah. So it just kind of gave me some flashbacks. Like, they went through a lot. Yeah. Because if I was stuck in another country with English as, you know, the native tongue there as my second language, I mean, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know how I would make it. Yeah. I want to bring this kind of to some of the real estate stuff. When you guys kind of were looking at your, I don't know if it was your finances, your lives, what was it? Which one of you said, hey, I think we should check out real estate as something that maybe we should add to our investing? It was Jason. And so what was your thinking? And then how receptive was Jen to this?
Yeah. So, my dad invested in real estate before, but he kept it really hands off to me. It was one of those things where, you know, parents would just do it and then not really involve me because it was like, I'm trying to isolate you from all this stuff. And then eventually I figured out, like, he went through a lot of challenges with tenants not paying and a whole bunch of other stuff, parties and smoking in units that you're not supposed to smoke. Went through the whole eviction process. I didn't realize he was going through that. But anyway, so that's kind of my early taste of real estate, right? And I work in commercial real estate as a project manager. So I'm kind of exposed to the real estate side of things, but never from the investing side of things. It's more about like building environments. I'm building high performance environments as opposed to investing in them. So we've always been heavy stock investors throughout our, I guess, working careers. And one day we were just Googling and just doing some research about like...
yeah, I saw what you mentioned about our website. You can say it.
It was great. It goes to your SEO. It's still there. So, you know, we did some Googling about investing and increasing net worth and just kind of stuff that we all try to go through at our age with kids trying to figure out and plan. And your website came up. I don't remember which one it was, but it was one of your earlier ones.
The Real Estate Renegades.
That's right, the Real Estate Renegades.
That one was a purely search engine optimized website. And it does look like it's from like 1998, that particular website. But when I saw Jason comment on the website saying, yeah, I found your website. And I think you said something like it looked like it hadn't been updated since like modems were invented. And you're right. You're right. It's because it was a search engine optimized website and we were using certain templates and we just let it run. And it's been like providing value to us for like over a decade. So we just kind of left it live out there, right? But that's the one you found.
Yeah. And that goes to show, I mean, you don't have to optimize everything to perfection where it's like, you know, you just fail fast kind of thing as opposed to figure out all the steps and then take a leap of faith. By that time that happens, it's like you're too late already. Yeah,
that's interesting you say that because I think we were doing this business for about a year and a half and we knew we had to make a website, but we were always waiting for like, okay, we'll have like a proper website with all these different features to it. And then one day I just got frustrated and I thought, we're sending out a weekly email. I'm writing a blog post. I'm just going to take these blog posts and make them websites and or web pages and I'm going to search engine optimize each page. And we did that for like 2 or 3 years before we even had like maybe a proper website. But just taking action, we got results from that and it served us so well. It's just like another one of those things that, you know, just diving in is more valuable sometimes than kind of overanalyzing. And also in your story that you shared with members, Jason, I have to bring it up that you're an engineer by education.
That's right.
You're a project manager now. Mm-hmm. And I always joke, we have to say this because Nadeem knows this too. when anyone starts to work with us, we always have this inside joke here at Rockstar that like, are they an engineer? And we're like, they're like, yeah. We always take a deep breath. Like, oh, jeez. Okay, they're gonna want to see the spreadsheet like to the minutia now. Like, here we go. Whereas I guess we've been doing this so long, and there's no fault in that at all. It's just we've been doing this so long. It's like you can blindfold us, put us in a city. We'll touch the side of the, tell us the price of this thing. Tell me what city I'm in, and I'll tell you if we buy it or we don't buy it. Like it's that basic. So to go through the website sometimes after doing it for like 10 years with people, you're like, holy smokes. And engineers always have the most, detail-oriented questions on the numbers. Yeah. So you went through that process then, I guess? You started crunching some numbers?
No, actually, even before crunching numbers. So we went to your website, and then it was one of these reading through the actual stories, and then looking at it and be like, hey, this is something here, right? It's Canadians, local. Who are these guys, right? What's this scam about? Yeah. The questions everyone asks.
Nadim, you didn't laugh at all until you said that. How are these people trying to rip me off right now?
Right, and just talk to Jen about it. Be like, okay, you got to read this ebook, right? That ebook miniseries you had, and just read it, and then read through it, skimmed it, and was like, hey, let's go sign up for their class. It's free. Like, what do we have to lose, right? Mm-hmm. So we went and signed up to your class, and then you were there when we were still allowed to be in person. And it was a very compelling presentation, like very compelling. Nothing salesy in terms of saying, oh, like you buy this and then you'll get that. It's here's the story, right? Here's the story of your business, and here's the story of how you've helped people, where that's something that we were just looking for. Like, okay, well, how can you guys help us? Because that's what we were trying to figure out, like who can help us.
And why did you check out real estate? Because you were already investing in stocks. Was it just something as a diversification kind of thing? Like, let's get a piece of real estate because we don't have an investment piece of real estate?
Yeah, okay. That's most of it. And like being in the commercial real estate, I see the growth, right? You see the growth of just commercial real estate. Like that's trickling down to residential because everyone needs somewhere to live. I could tell you, like before we started, an acre was less than $1 million. When we were looking at it internally with my company, right?
What year would that be?
What's 3 years ago?
2019.
2019.
2018, like less than $1 million. It was just creeping up to 900, $1 million an acre. And look where.
What are you seeing now?
Like 4 or 5 plus, depending on what density, what area.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's basically the reason. We were just looking to diversify and put some money into something that could help us grow a bit faster and bigger than stocks.
And then Jen, were you on board with this, or were you just like, okay, let's try this out? Like, what was your thinking?
Yeah, like I wanted to try it out, but between the two of us, I would say he's more risk adverse than I am, right? I'm the one's like, oh, I'm always have these limiting beliefs, like, oh, is it going to be okay? Are we going to lose money? all these thoughts that go through your head when you're trying to get your first property. And don't get me wrong, when I got invited, or when he invited me to go to this Fast Start program, it's like, all right, I don't know what they're going to sell me. Like, what are they going to talk about? I don't know. But I went with an open mind, right? And, the second we came out of there, we signed up for your membership. Like, the second we left that night, we signed up. So it just shows,
because
your capability.
I wish you told me you were 2 engineers right there. Like, hey, you got 2 engineers to sign up?
You were offering a discount, so it was like, come on, being Asian, discount.
Got it. Oh, yeah, I didn't even realize. Okay, that's noted. All right. Discount. That works for the Scottish side of my family too. Yeah. Discount. We're gonna get a better price here.
Yeah. No, and I mean, Jen's right about that. Like part of our relationship has been kind of this yin and yang thing, but on a good side, right? Where I'll tend to jump first, or put my foot in the water first before kind of going through all the details. But she balances it out by saying, "Hold on, let's just take a look, like from a different angle, right? Yeah. Give me some perspective, because sometimes I'll just be like, hey, let's kind of do it."
Awesome. Okay. And then you met Nadim, and Nadim starts, I would imagine you start going, where was your first property? What city? I forget. St. Catharines. And you guys probably had not been in St. Catharines?
Where's St. Catharines?
Yeah. Okay. So then.
I still remember this first time we went out on a Sunday, and I think we found property the first trip out.
First trip out, yeah.
But I think we were just going for a tour, looking at different properties, and then we discussed rent to own. Yeah. And the house we saw, I think the very first one was like the perfect rent to own fit. But I don't think that was even the mindset we're just going with. I think we were talking about Burr. We're looking at student rentals, different options, right?
Yeah.
So how did you end up deciding to go with the rent to own? Safe?
Yeah, for me, I can tell for me, the whole rent-to-own model was new, and then I got introduced to that model at that Fast Start class. And for me, it was a great way to get our feet wet because there's almost like a guarantee in a way. Like you have that contract set up. There's a guarantee that you win something in the end. You get something in the end.
Right.
You know, that I feel like a lot of people's first fears of going to real estate is, oh, the real estate market's going to crash. Yeah. Oh, I'm going to lose money. Like, I'm pretty sure that's everybody's first
Yes, and tenants will destroy my entire property. That's the other one.
Yeah, that's probably number two, right? Yeah. So the rent-to-own contract kind of, mitigates those two things. Yeah. Number one, you know what you're going to get in the end. You know it's going to be, X percent or X dollars or whatever. And number two, you know that tenant's going to take care of the property because, they're going to make it their own. So those are two things that you're most concerned about. You're basically mitigating through this rent-to-own contract.
It's interesting. That's exactly what I went through. I've always had money in my life, just never bought a property. Until I joined Rockstar, learning about rent-to-own, that's the first property that I ever bought was just feeling safe.
Exactly. Yeah. And I feel that's a great way to get started. And it's not the only way to do it. We all know there's other strategies, but I feel like it's a great way to get your feet wet.
Yeah.
It's interesting because when we started, I think it was like we had already flipped properties. We had already owned rentals, student rentals, but the rent to own model was just to accomplish what you're saying, Jen. It was like, okay, how do we get someone who we know the right thing is for them to buy property in their lives, but how do we mitigate all the risks? And rent to own just answered that question. But it's interesting now, we probably at Rockstar do 0 to 1% of all our transactions are rent to own stuff now, because as investors that we've worked with have matured like yourselves and gotten more experience, you realize a lot of the fears that you had, they're out the window. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to sell a property, especially after the appreciation of the last 10 years or maybe even the last 2 years. Oh, yeah. Everyone's like, no, I'm just holding properties forever. So it's a bit of a cyclical thing.
But saying that, I'm getting a lot more investors who are joining us are looking to do rent to own recently.
Yeah, got it. And I have to give Nadeem credit. Nadeem has been someone who has always articulated the value of that particular strategy. So maybe it's not 0, 1%. So. Maybe it's 5%, all because of Nadeem Ahmed doing the different rent-to-own stuff. Okay, so then you guys go out on that first trip, you buy a property on the first trip?
Yeah, I think we were.
Oh, they totally thought you were ripping them off.
I think it was the first trip.
It was the first trip.
Yeah.
We put an offer.
In.
We looked at a few properties that day, I think, but in the end, we just circled back to that one.
Yep.
So you're in St. Catharines, you do this first property, and then the second property, if from reading your story, you did it right away within the next month?
Yeah, so the next week out, we went again to take a look at properties. Yeah. And then same thing, the Sunday, we placed another offer because it made sense, right? It was a student rental. And when it came down to it, it's about numbers. So Nadeem helping us educate on numbers, putting it into our, at that time, not so fancy spreadsheet, but good enough for us to understand. Now
your spreadsheet's definitely the master class spreadsheet.
No, you know what? It's not. We've added
a few lines, but it's not
overly complicated.
Oh, really? Okay.
No, we've seen some spreadsheets, and they're 10 tabs open where one.
We had the winner for us has been there was members. Their grandfather was a Russian rocket scientist. Yeah. This is a true story. The spreadsheet comes back to us. It has 10 sub worksheets with all different numbers being populated, little formulas and kind of little macros kind of running. And on the main spreadsheet, it was pumping out all these different numbers. And they came back to us and they said, you know what? Everything you talk about with real estate, it actually works. We had our grandfather check this out. He's a rocket scientist. He put the spreadsheet together. Look at this. Your numbers actually work. And we're like, oh my gosh, we are Russian rocket scientists approved right now on this thing. So yeah, we've seen every spreadsheet under the sun, but we've also seen other people who are just like, no, I know this is going to work. I'm just going to go out and buy a property. And they do so little analysis. It scares us. We're like, whoa. Do you want to just look into this a little bit more? And you're like, no, we just trust you guys. We're like, holy smokes. So you guys went out and got this second property then, and there's a student rental by Brock?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. Is that a property that you still own?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
The rent to own, do you still own?
Yep. It's coming up on its last year. So
okay.
Obviously, it depends on what our tenant wants to do with it. So there's an option to take it over and buy it, and we'll offload it.
Speaking also, just going back what's beneficial for us, but I think in the same time,
Come closer to the mic.
Sorry.
There you go.
Also being beneficial for us, it's also, and on Jason was thinking about helping the tenant to get into their first home and buy, right? So it's also being helping out the other.
It was, and that was part of the win-win. It's not always just about, okay, how can it benefit us as the investor?
Right.
When it comes down to it, we're trying to help people, right? most of us landlords are doing it so that we can create some cash flow, create some equity, build some wealth. When it comes down to it, though, we are actually helping people, right? We might not see it that way, but really, you're providing people with a home, some residence, some
Security.
some security, a roof over their head, where times where some people don't even get access to that. So, yeah, it's a win-win for this tenant. If they decide to take it over, we'll be happy. Unfortunately, based on appreciation prices, I mean.
But at the time when we did
Yeah.
when we did the number crunch, you would be happy with that price.
Yeah,
today,
we were
right?
happy with the 7% appreciation year over year, but
Who knew you'd be off by about triple?
Oh,
Yeah, I know.
That's when that first started happening to us on rent to own. So for anyone listening, if you're not familiar with rent to owns, before the tenant moves in, you agree to a buyout price, usually after 3 years, where they can buy the property from you at this set price. I remember a member that we've worked with for a long time. It was a Burlington townhome, and he appreciated it at 7%. This was probably the year 2009 or 10. And we were like, oh my gosh, like 7%, are you crazy? Like compounded for 3 years. The buyout price is going to be so high. No bank will appraise it at that. The tenant's going to have all kinds of troubles buying out. Doesn't it go buyout? No problem. It appreciated like 7.5%. The bank was fine with it. He made fun of us. He's like, I should teach the class. Why are you guys teaching real estate stuff? Right. And then now in this last few years, even if you did 7%, when property prices go up like 15, 24%, compounded. I mean, that's the downfall of kind of rent to own, because you're having them buy out. And that's when buyouts on rent to owns always go through the roof. When there's so much equity in the home, the buyout rate of rent to owns will go to like into the 90% of every one of them that comes due. But when real estate market's correct, or not even correct, we haven't had that, but when 2008 or so, when 2009, when the great financial crisis was still going on in the US and housing really was getting a bad name in the US, even though prices weren't coming down here, because all the headlines were negative, all the rent to owns that were coming due, because we were doing 2-year rent to owns back then, nobody was buying out. And the words were, we're not going to buy this. This property is going to go, we're not going to be stuck with this property. It's going to go down in value over the next few years. We're walking away, or we'll stay and just rent from you. And so the buyouts went from, what we thought would be like 80% or so to like 30%. Yep. So it's just weird how human psychology works. Like it really has, it's almost just however the real estate is being portrayed in the media will affect the buyout rate of a rent to own.
Sure.
Yep.
And it's been fascinating to watch over the years. So like you can probably generalize on a rent to own and saying that 50% of them get bought out. But it's a kind of a bad number to throw out there, because when they're appreciating, it's like 90-something%.
Yeah.
And when it's negative news, it's like 30-something%, right?
Yep.
So it's just kind of the weirdest thing to watch human nature.
Yeah.
Yep.
But at the end of it, I mean, we're okay with it, because the thing is we went in there establishing some criteria. Mm-hmm. And the end of that criteria means that it's a win-win again for both us and for the tenant. Right, or for potentially new homeowners. So
so your profit on that, even though it could have been more at fair market value of today, what you calculated, you're fine with it. You guys are very nice people. We've had a few members very upset with us that they didn't appreciate them much higher.
You know what? That's the thing.
What we secretly don't want the tenant.
Sure, of course. Yeah.
But,
if you're stuck with it, it's a good problem
exactly,
at this point.
Exactly.
Yeah, and look at it this way. If we didn't take the jump and the leap of faith, we would have had nothing. Like we wouldn't be in this position to actually say, "Hey, we're coming out with something."
Yeah. And look how much you learn. I just think how much you've learned. Mm-hmm. Like, look, just a strategy. You might never use the rent-to-own strategy again, but isn't it nice to have that in your back pocket should you need it on a property? Mm-hmm. So what about the student rental property? When Nadeem introduced you to that idea, how has managing that property been up to this point? Are you managing it yourselves, or do you have property managers?
No, we manage it ourselves. It's been pretty good. We haven't had any large issues. We're lucky that place was a brand new build, so a lot of the the guts and stuff are new. From managing tenants' point of view, I mean, we've been pretty lucky. Our students have been really good. There hasn't been any crazy parties where they completely trashed our house that we hear and we.
Wait, that doesn't happen?
Yeah.
No, but kudos to you, for managing, not too many people manage student rentals on their own.
Yeah, it's this debate about, okay, do we manage ourselves, do we don't? So, I mean, the first one was we just want to learn the process to understand, okay, well, if we do hire a property manager, what do they have to go through so that, we don't get, I'm going to say that word, scammed again, right? Mm-hmm. They're charging us too much. But when we went through it, it wasn't too bad, because the big part of it was a new product, like Jen said. So a lot of the maintenance, we could defer it for another 5 years. There's no need to replace shingles when the shingles are brand new. So a lot of those things, you know, that helped us decide that, okay, let's just try this first.
Yeah.
And when it came down to it, was just asking other people, other investors, like, what's your experience with managing student rentals? And we heard more about the higher end student rentals. I wouldn't call it the luxury market of student rentals, but you see where the trend is going lately is that people are looking for nicer spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Back when we were students and we were living,
every house
one
was
would
a
live in there.
slum lord.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
right? And that's not the product anymore that's being put out there. Parents are looking.
And I find with student rentals, if you show care to the students and you respect your property, they'll respect you back, right?
Yeah, it
Take
was
care
just
of the property.
establishing those
Exactly, that
expectations up
relationship.
front and the relationships. Because when it comes down to who's paying the rent for the students, the parents.
Right.
Yeah.
And back to that whole story at the beginning, right? In terms of like, what are you looking for your kids? You're trying to find a good place for your kids to live. You don't going to put them in a place where, you know, potentially you'll have to deal with, I don't know, all these other issues.
How did you guys handle your fears when COVID first broke out and everybody thought we weren't going to get paid rent and and if you did have student rentals? So first of all, on regular rental properties, I think it was April 1st, 2020. Am I mixing up my years?
Yep,
What year are we?
Yep,
2020.
yep.
Is that when COVID started?
Yep.
April 1st, 2020. And then May 1st, 2020, there was those 2 months were the biggest panic we had ever seen in here from investors thinking, holy shit, we are screwed. And when April 1st rolled in and rents started coming in, it was like, okay, yes, residential real estate, people need a place to live. And then May 1st kind of proved it. We're like, okay, I think we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
But did you guys have an emotional roller coaster? Did you miss rent? And on the student rental, did you miss rent during the COVID era there?
Yeah, so conveniently, that's kind of when the turnover of students from the end of the semester starting the new semester was starting, right? Literally in between that, right? Because
April's the last month.
April's the last, May's the last month.
April's the last. May 1st.
Yeah, sorry, April. April starts, exactly. So it was right in between that period where we were like very confused. We were like, holy crap. I remember messaging Nadeem. I wrote you guys, but like,
did you? I already forgot.
well, yeah, you guys were just like, we're coming out with something. We're gonna broadcast something to all our members, and we're gonna.
But the option was, it's a nice house. You will be able to convert back to a single family home.
Well,
right?
that's exactly. So when we just stepped that back a little bit, it was like, okay, well, what's our worst case? Our worst case is that we can rent it out as a single family, or we really can offload it. At that time, we haven't thought about short-term rentals like Airbnbs, but that could have been an option too. I mean, when it came down to it, we did have 2 vacancies, but that was because two students, their situation, they had to leave early. Their parents just couldn't afford the rent. And it was one of those, am I going to go after students for, $600? I'll just go find another one. And that was that mentality. Went to it, just posted it on the Facebook forums, and we found students willing to move out because they still wanted to be away from their home, from their parents, and be able to study, regardless if it was COVID
Good for
or
you
not.
guys, man. And that's what we all learned. Students basically want to be away from
even
home.
your son,
Yeah.
even your son, right?
Yeah, my son, I guess Western was shut down again this January, but because he's in a student rental off of campus, not in the residence, they all went back. They're like, we are going back. I think they stayed home over the holidays an extra week or two. I already forget. But then they were like, we're back, even though classes were not in person. Because they're like, we're out of here, right? We're going to go live together.
Want their freedom.
Yeah. But good for you guys. I mean, like that's another thing now that you've been through. You've seen a pretty epic real estate situation and you've survived it. And to me now you have those fears to learn, not fears. I'm not saying you were fearful. I just mean you have those experiences to learn from so that should something happen to you next time, you just kind of roll with it. And so really kudos to you. And to think about the other options you can do with the properties, that's something we always talk about here where, can we convert a student rental to a single family? Can we convert it to a duplex? Can we do a rent to own? Like what are our options on this property? It gives us a little bit more freedom with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the great thing about real estate. It gives us options, right? And that the whole saying is options give you options.
Yeah.
Right.
So I remember actually going back to the options, like even your rent to own, I think it's got the split level, right?
Yep.
And I know we talked about doing a conversion on that too.
Yeah, we've been thinking about
right?
that. Like,
so
what do we
if
do?
the tenant doesn't buy out, that's an easy, because that's, again, we did rent to own, but we had other options with the house, just buying the house, right?
Yeah. And there's comparables on the market where they've converted a similar house into a duplex. So, needless to say, that's an option that we're considering.
Sure.
But even short-term rental, because it's in a great area of St. Catharines.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm shocked at the amount of short-term rentals going on in the whole Niagara region. Like, I'm just completely blown away. There's a few members of our team, including Nadeem, who are in that area all the time. And I'm blown away the amount of Airbnb stuff. I think Niagara on the Lake, you can't do Airbnb. There's different pockets that were the bylaws, but in general, the short-term rental market out there is just like fascinating to me. I was clueless to it.
And St. Catharines recently just, I think they are starting to allow short-term rentals through like a licensing program. So similar to like Thorold and other areas, it's just a licensing thing. And that's a barrier to a lot of people who are like, oh, I got to go apply for a license now. Well, if you got a property that's legit and you got no concerns, then just pay the $400, get it over with. You know, that's an extra selling feature for your tenant to say, hey, I have a property that is actually licensed here.
Property.
Yeah, you guys are interesting to me because I find that I meet most people your age. First of all, you're in your 30s. You're in your 30s. You're not our target market. Like, we get people in our 20s here.
Oh, okay.
And then we get people in their kind of mid 40s and beyond.
Interesting. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, because people in their 30s, basically, you're broke. You're having kids. You're moving into your first like family home. You need the car that you bought in your early 20s is now garbage, and you need a new car. So you need a new car in your 30s. You need a new house. If you're having kids, you have all these extra costs that you have, and we just generally don't see people in their 30s. And then usually, if they haven't done anything in their 20s, they'll come to us in their 40s and start saying, "Hey, we need to start adding some real estate to our lives." We also do see some people in their 20s. Because in their 20s, you're usually still living at home. If you're working, you have some disposable income. You can kind of get together maybe with you and a buddy and buy do a joint venture and buy your first kind of income property. But in their 30s, you guys are the anomaly. Like, we don't have many people in their 30s.
It's funny you say that because we've had this conversation where, we always talk about your network is so important, right? Trying networking with people who are with similar mindsets, right? And we've always talked about, we're like, it's hard for us to find sometimes people in the same boat as us. We have young kids. How do we do, we always struggle. Like, how do we do this with kids? Like I was just telling Nadeem earlier, I haven't seen the third property that we have. I've seen pictures. I've seen videos, right? I haven't even seen it because, those times that Jason went
Jason's
out.
rants.
Jason's went out to the property, deal with tenants and I was at home with the kids, especially during COVID. I couldn't I typically would hand my kids off to grandparents, but we were trying to be careful, and we couldn't, babysitters couldn't get through into our house, so it's like, okay, I'll stay home with the kids, and you go.
Were you working as well?
And we were working, right? So it's funny you say that because we've had that exact same conversation.
Oh yeah,
it's hard for us to find that.
And you just niche. from I guess 14 years of doing this, it's going to be really next to impossible for you. But I will tell you that now that you've accumulated some real estate in your 30s, now you get to and I know this sounds so far away, but now you get into your 50s and it's game changing because the compounding of the properties, take any appreciation rate and just put it into a spreadsheet and compound kind of your portfolio now, 20 years from now, and it's a game changing number. Like, I find most people focus so much on their fears of what can go wrong with the real estate that we sometimes will tell them, hey, what are your properties worth right now? Take any appreciation rate that you want. Take 3%, 2%, 5.5%, 7%, 21, whatever you want. Put it into a spreadsheet and run that sucker for 20 years. What are those properties worth? Do you think this is worth the journey? And I find most people are so focused on the immediate problems and things that could go wrong today that they don't see or extrapolate to the future. Yep. And for you guys now in your 30s to be accumulating, it's just, I already know where you're going to be, and I'm like, wow, this is exciting stuff.
Yeah, it's part of it is if you take it from a stock investing piece, right, where a lot of new investors have similar fears. They're always worried about losing money. So the short-sightedness of, hey, I'm worried about losing $1 to actually get 5, right? Lose 1 to get 5. They're worried about the 1 as opposed to looking at the upside. So
there's still 4, right?
Yeah, there's
there's
still so
4.
much
Totally.
There's still 4.
And human nature is so interesting too, because in the 2009-10 era, when real estate had kind of this bad name, we were seeing properties in Hamilton. We weren't into St. Catharines just yet at that time, but we were just looking at the income and the expenses. And we were like, wait, the income on this property is this much in rent. The expenses when you buy it at this price and this interest rate are this much. these things look like no-brainers to us. And I would tell some of my friends who were in the software industry back then, and they were like, are you crazy? I'm not going to be buying this property in like Hamilton, Ontario. And we were just looking at the numbers thinking, I don't understand why. Like, this just makes sense. But then when the real estate market starts to pump really hard, you get all these people who were not paying attention to it. To your point, Jason, like then they're like, oh my gosh, let's get in. We have to get in at any price. And then if it turns a little bit, they're like, oh my gosh, it's over. And you're just standing back watching this going, human nature is ridiculous, you know? So if you just get in for the right approach and just look at the numbers and just stay in for the long haul, it's going to work out. Yeah. So
and there's a lot of context that's provided being in a network of like-minded individuals where part of it is just educating everyone about, you know, it's not about timing the market. Sometimes you can time the market, but you know, that's a little bit of luck and combined with some hard work, but it's time in the market. It comes down to, we always hear it. Hear all these little sayings, but a lot of people don't take that to heart because it's like, well, yeah, you know, I don't believe
you got lucky.
Yeah,
you got lucky.
Right?
So how did you get into this third property? Is interesting to me because this is during so Jen, you didn't see it.
I still haven't seen it.
Okay, this is perfect. I love
videos.
that. I love this.
Videos.
So now Jason's wild. Yeah. So now he's gone from cautiously putting numbers into a spreadsheet saying, Jen, what do you think? To like, he's out of control. So now.
Remember jump first kind of thing?
Yeah. So what's the deal with this property? Nadeem, you found some property and said, Jason, buy this?
It was a...
or did you?
Not the nicest area, but it was a good opportunity because it had 3 units.
Yeah, like I think I saw it in one of the emails or something like that.
So what city are we in? St. Catharines?
This is Welland now.
Welland now. Okay.
Yeah, so we've done each city, right?
Yeah. So it's one of those. It was like, oh, this is interesting. Let's take a look. Hey, Nadeem, can we take a look? And went to visit. I remember there was a few other Rockstar members there as well. You were touring it with some other Rockstar members, and everyone. I remember coming out. Some of the faces of the other members were like a bit concerned. It was one of those. Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Right. So compared to our first two, I mean, it was a bit older. So not new product or anything like that. So needed a bit of TLC. But it was one of those, okay, let's run the numbers and understand where we got to be.
You look beyond.
That's right. Yeah. And there's times where this property does give me a lot of headache and anxiety, right? Because it requires a bit more management.
Yeah. Because of the age of the property?
That and
or the tenant profile in the property?
It's not as strong as the other areas that we're in. But we went into that understanding that. And it was one of those, okay, well, you know what? What's the lift? What's the upside? Right? There's going to be a bit of pain. We knew that. Mm-hmm. We never know what kind we're going to experience either. Like I was in my head just saying, oh, well, I'm expecting this, and this to happen. It was just like, okay, well.
So did you buy this? So this is a triplex, and you bought it with tenants in the property?
Yeah,
we've changed over, right? I think everybody.
Yeah, everyone's changed over.
And they're all your placements, right?
No, actually, we've hired out to property management because we just figured at some point it was not worth my time to just be looking for tenants all the time or managing little issues. Because when it came down to it, it was like, okay, well, what's my ROL, my return on lifestyle? Is if I'm driving an hour and a half every single time
I
deal with
call
something.
you being Welland and we'd connect. Right?
Yeah, it was like, oh, I'm in Welland again. He's like, oh.
What was an example of something that you were doing?
So I'll give you an example. So there was one time where when we just closed the property, literally a week after closing the property, I got 2 calls, right, from the new tenant that I placed, and it was one of these emails of saying, hey, one of the tenants sent me.
Just say it. What is about to come out of your mouth? Just say it.
One of your tenants sent me a gift, and
so it was like a bag of shit or something.
It's a female.
It's a female tenant, and a male tenant sent her a gift. And we call it the infamous lingerie tenant.
Oh shit!
Shout out to Kelly Hawks on this. She helped us out with dealing with this one, so she knows about it. But yeah, it was the other tenant gifted some lingerie to her. And I remember she telling me, she was like, hey, I moved specifically to avoid specific issues like this. It's like, oh my goodness, really? Like, how could you have guessed, right?
Yeah.
And it was one of those, okay, well, what do I do? How do I deal with this? It's not in
where's the rule?
It's not in the Rockstar guidebook. Lingerie? Oh, damn.
Kelly Hawks is the catch-all. So if you're listening to this, Kelly Hawks is basically a very experienced paralegal who specializes in the Tenant Act here in Ontario. So she's the catch-all. If you run into a situation that's not covered anywhere, it's like, oh, I guess you have to call Kelly.
Yeah, but it was one of those. Like, so just went to the property and just talked to the tenants, be like, hey, what's going on?
And I think you added cameras for safety.
Yeah, we added cameras for safety just because, right? Because we didn't want to make that tenant feel uncomfortable. So, and there's some other issues like a flood. Like water is like the enemy to all real estate,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And it was one of those where just water found its way in, and it was one of those. I remember a message at 11 o'clock at night. Oh, just letting you know, this happened 3 days ago. I'm like, what? 3 days ago? Like, what? Oh my God. I remember messaging everyone, but like, oh my crap, what do I do? Right? How do I get the water out? And it was really nice. The tenant had a parent that lived close by and cleaned it all up. And then when I got there, it was pretty much like all dry and everything. But it was one of those. Okay, well,
What was that water? Was that a water leak? A sump pump that was malfunctioning? What was it?
yeah, through the window well.
Oh, got it. So did you have to dig outside to seal that up?
Yeah, we still have to dig it up and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nick to this day still doesn't own a property that hasn't had a water issue.
Yeah.
Every property I own with Nick has water problems. That's just kind of like his thing. But you're just making me think of just, when we were talking earlier about our kids and putting them through different situations, and then hearing your story. We had this duplex. We still have it, but the tenants in the basement were causing all kinds of problems and quasi kind of threatening the tenants upstairs. They were being noisy. They had like so many guests over, clogging the driveway, and it was really like, it was nothing you could evict them over, but it was enough that like it legitimately was kind of disrupting the peace and quiet of the tenants upstairs. And the tenants upstairs wouldn't go on record to say it was disrupting their kind of living standard, so that Kelly was telling us, unless the tenants upstairs actually go on record and sign a piece of paper saying this is disrupting them, it's difficult for you to evict unless you get like a neighbor to kind of like rat out these tenants and get them to sign a piece of paper. I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this one? But the tenants upstairs constantly complain to us. Yep. Saying, hey, the downstairs tenants are causing all this noise. And I'm like, hey, if you sign this form, I forget what it was. I think it was an N6. I forget which tenant board form it was. But they wouldn't sign it. But they kept calling me. So I had to have these like adult conversations with the tenant upstairs saying, listen, I want to help you, but you need to help yourself to help me help you. Yeah. You need to go on the record. But anyway, one day I kind of got fed up with it. They had some people that were living in the basement property, and I got Aiden, my son. I guess he would have been maybe 10 at that time. I said, hey, we're going to go talk to a tenant. Come with me. And I probably should have never brought him to this situation, but they had like 3 or 4 people all hanging out in the backyard. I went down in with Aiden behind me to knock on the tenant's door to talk to them about the situation. They opened the door about 3 inches. And I'm kind of looking through, we're trying to look through, see what's going on inside the house. And I could see there's another bed in the middle of the living room. I'm like, hey, do you have like extra people sleeping here? That, like,
yeah.
And it's really like, I'm not supposed to ask that. They're allowed to actually have visitors. But I'm like trying to ask, and I'm keeping Aiden behind me with like one arm because I don't know what's going down here. And then we left. I forget I think I collected some rent, talked to them about keeping the noise down if they were having people over, and left. And I just reflect back. I'm like, what was I doing bringing my son there? Like, who knows what was going to happen in this kind of situation?
Yeah.
Probably not the best idea to like have all these adults around. I'm walking in as a landlord with my 10-year-old son saying, I want to show you a situation here, Yeah. But that was my attempt at trying to show my son, hey, this is like the stuff you have to handle.
Yeah.
But interesting. So when you said that, it reminds me of kind of going back to our first property where at that time we just had Josh, right? He was just 1.5, so like around 2, just under 2, right?
Yep.
So it was one of those very busy summers where we're closing 2 properties back to back, and the first one was obviously rent to own. So it was like, okay, we got to get this tenanted, we got to get this filled, and we didn't have babysitting at that time, and it was one of those, okay, well, just bring them along, just bring the kids along. And I remember him just running around the property, but like playing around, and the tenants coming in, or all the people coming in, but like, oh, is that your kid? Who's this kid running around? It's like, oh, yeah, it's our kid. But it was just one of those.
That's what it takes to get stuff done.
Yeah.
That's what you do.
Yeah. But you know what? He asked us to this day, hey, what's that house we went to with that backyard and that,
Wow.
etc.
Good memory.
There was a park in the back.
There's a park in the back.
Right, the backyard open to a public park, and that's what he remembers. He remembers, oh, I want to go to that park again. Mommy can go to that park.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So this so the third property though, you purchased it. It's a triplex. You have it now. Do all the properties you currently have, are they the cash flowing positive at this moment in time? Where are you with kind of cash flow numbers on it? Not specifically. I just don't know if you.
The triplex is cash flowing very well. It's cash flowing. The student rental is cash flowing. The rent to own is actually break even, I think. Slightly negative, just due to some of the increases in property tax, utilities. Like that stuff has increased a lot. So, I mean,
It's a learning experience.
it's a learning
right?
experience. We, you know, when we plug in as many numbers as you think, not all of them come out exactly accurate. So, but we're okay with that. I mean, it is what it is. It's nothing that we can go back and say, hey, I wish I did it differently and I would have got this and that.
Are you calculating the option payment as part of your cash flow?
Yeah.
And so that property, so now that you have this experience with real estate up until this point, with this rent to own, you've done a lot now. You have a rent to own, you have a student rental, you have this triplex. How do you look at properties going forward? Will cash flow be your number one thing? Location be the number one thing? The property type? Is there like how do you approach it now?
Yeah, so that's part of our larger goals now, where we're trying to figure out, okay, how's it going to fit in our lifestyle? Because we've gone through, like you said, gone through so many. Do we want cash flow or do we want equity? So it's a battle. So we are kind of going through that right now. Like we want the cash flow so it can help supplement our income, because really, realistically, part of the goal is to exit from the traditional 9 to 5. But we all know that it's harder to find strong cash flowing properties. It's still there. It's available. It's just harder to find. But listening to you guys talk and reiterate the importance of building wealth through properties, right? So it's that balance. Okay, well, what are we going to prioritize? And I think we don't have that answer right now because we're still going through that. We're trying to figure out, okay, what makes sense for us, because it's a delicate balance.
It is. And I think we were talking about this, I don't think we were recording yet, just about sometimes property can be not the best investment property and really affect your lifestyle. We were talking about the property we purchased in Croatia, and it just didn't make any financial sense when we bought that property. Like at the time I was sharing that it probably cost us 3 rental properties because the down payments were so low back then. The amount we bought it for, that was like 3 rental properties. But I'm so grateful we did it, because for the last, I guess, dozen years, except for one summer, we've been there with the families, and our kids have traveled and enjoyed it, and they've learned different cultures and different perspective on the world. And we brought them, I think a whole different view on life by having that kind of property and just kind of living that way. So sometimes I think, not every real estate purchase needs to really, like, you kind of have to live in the now as well. So it is this kind of delicate balance.
Yeah.
And then if anyone's listening to this, it's not like we're so pro real estate. It's more that we're pro owning assets. And that real estate, for most Canadians, we're fortunate enough to live in this environment where you can buy real estate as an asset that kind of works. And it's, I don't want to say easy, because listen to everything that you've been through, right? But it's kind of like a business in a box. You buy this thing, the customers kind of live there, they show up every day, you deal with the finances and the expenses, and there's things to manage, but you're buying little businesses, essentially. And it's to me, the easiest way to accumulate assets into your life. And ultimately, I think that's what we all want, because that's what's going to give us freedom, owning assets. So,
Yeah.
And I guess I'm just kind of ranting around here a little bit, but I don't think your next property purchase absolutely needs to be the home run cash flow. Sometimes you do need to make the lifestyle purchase.
Yeah. I guess that's all part of the journey, right? Kind of figuring out what's next, because we don't have all the answers. And if you're listening to this and you hear a lot of people on Instagram saying it seems like they have it all figured out, I guarantee you they don't. Because what you see on the outside is really different from the inside. So every new real estate investor that goes through the same fears. Even seasoned investors, we talk, like, people have very similar doubts. It's just a matter of how you're going to find solutions to those problems. There's always a solution to a problem. That's what we've been taught. So if anything school taught me, it was find a solution. There's ways to find a solution. It's not 1 + 1 = 2.
How does your commercial real estate background affected some of your residential thinking? Have you been able to kind of parlay some of the skills from that world into this world, or no, they're just kind of like 2 separate things?
They're a bit different. Scale and the type of properties that I work on are very different. If anything, it's been more of the management stuff that's been helping me in terms of organization. But I'm also trying to get up to that as well, because how many how many projects can I manage on my own, right? Especially with young kids, with a family. You know, I still want to enjoy my life. It's like, I don't want to be a full-time property or project manager in real estate, because then that takes away from what I'm actually like want to do in life. So there is a bit of comparables where I can take some of the lessons that I'm learning at work, but it's not all the same.
Mm-hmm.
Not all
And
the
then Jen, what type of engineering do you do?
I am a chemical engineer,
Oh,
and
cool.
I work as an engineering manager at a consultant firm in Burlington.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. For some reason, when you said chemical engineer, I was trying to tie it to real estate. And have you guys ever watched Breaking Bad?
Yes.
Okay, I just thought, oh, here's someone who could do some, make some crazy.
That's a chemist.
Sorry,
That's
that's a chemist. Sorry. See, that's you can see where my brain goes. I'm like, oh, how does this work in real estate? Well, I guess who knows what's happening in some of these properties. But okay, so being a chemical engineer, what type of work? So what exactly do you do as a chemical engineer?
So at my work, we're consultants. So we work with a lot of the big oil and gas firms.
Oh, got it.
Like, the Suncors, the Imperial Oils, the big ones, and we help them build plants, right, or modify plants, increase their capacities, things like that.
Holy smokes. So both of your experiences, and then to take what you do in your kind of careers to bring it to residential real estate, the scale of what you're doing compared to your residential investing is like so different.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like we've looked at it and it'd be like, okay, well, what's the most common theme here, right? Where we're working and in real estate, being a landlord, it's working with humans,
Yeah.
right? Our tenants are people, and being a landlord is actually just a human management. It's a people management issue. So actually my job, the most relatable thing is my interaction with different clients, different vendors. That's the best thing that I take away from my job, is like being able to connect with different people. Like, I don't know if you understand the disc profile, if you've heard about the Breyer Miggs thing.
Yeah. We've had everyone here.
Yeah.
Actually, did you do the disc profile? Everyone at Rockstar pretty much does the full disc before they start working here.
Yeah, and when you understand that a little bit better, you can actually use that to your advantage. Well, hopefully, right, through practice. And it goes back to one of those challenges we had on that triplex, where it wasn't anything technical or anything with the property. It was about with tenants. That inherited tenant that was the lingerie tenant, he ended up not paying rent for 8 months. And that was a really, really hard time for us, right? Because it was one of those, oh, crap, the story you hear about actually comes true, right? But then we went through a lot of lessons, but then we connected with the right people to help us get out of that problem. So it was one of those, I went to the property maybe like 3 weeks in a row trying to convince this tenant, be like, hey, what's going on, right? If it was first the approach of, okay, let's be, Nadeem and I were like, okay, you be good cop, I be bad cop, okay?
I remember that.
Right, we go in and be like, let's try to like see what's going on here. And that didn't work. It was one of those like just complete right over the head. And I went in with
He was a strange character.
It was a strange character. And I went in with a few other investors that I've connected with to try to leverage their expertise. And same thing, it was, well, let's try a different approach. It did not work. And then I went on my own. And it went strong arm. It was one of those strong arms, right? Like came in, be like really nice, and then just turned on the strong, the high D profile. It was like, hey, you gotta get out of here or do something, right? Because this is not acceptable. It was one of those. But
it's funny how you go through that shift because when we first had to serve somebody papers because they weren't paying rent, I went to drop it off at the mailbox of the house. I was so scared that I parked like 2 doors down, and I saw where the mailbox was on their front porch, and I kind of like beelined it like up into the house, dropped it in the mailbox, and then I like took off, and then I sent them an email like from back at home or wherever I was saying, hey, dropped a note for you in the mailbox. And then after years have gone by, now it's like, hey, listen, you owe rent, here's the form. Okay, this is a business. We had this talk before you moved in. Let us know if you're paying tomorrow. If not, we're just going to take the next step. So you transition from like this, or me anyway, from this like scared person to just like, look, I'm ready to deal with anything. What you got?
And that's in the back of my mind, because I remember you telling this story on your podcast, right? So in the back of my mind, I'm like, I hear Tom's voice, but like opening the mailbox, dropping it in. I'm like, literally, holy crap! Is the tenant looking out the window?
Yeah, exactly.
Really
That kind of,
open the
did the
window,
curtains move?
yeah.
Did the curtains move?
It was one of those. I looked around. I looked around the property. If you could see me on camera, I'm literally scanning the windows, be like, is this tenant there? And just put it there, took a photo, and then left.
You run for your life. That's the most ridiculous, sad thing to report, but it happens to all of us. I don't care who you are. It happens to everybody.
Yeah.
You know?
We should do a show at everyone's first N4.
Yeah. You're first terrified. But then when you don't get rent for like X number of weeks or months, all of a sudden your tolerance to handle anything just starts going up.
Yeah.
And you're like, hey, listen, you know what? I need my rent.
Yeah.
You know? So it's funny how that transitions. I want to ask you guys something. You guys both seem to have a really interesting perspective on life with your kids. And you were talking about Canada, how we kind of live in a bubble here. And you seem very principle based in how you're talking about like working with people, that the rental or real estate business is more about a people management business. Where does that come from? Why do you have this thinking in this way? Do you have very consciously described principles in your life that you live by? Or is this just something unconscious that I'm seeing in you? Where do you think the way you look at the world comes from? Your parents? Together, do you have these conversations?
Well, Dr. Phil.
I don't know. Actually.
I think, I mean, it if anything, it just comes back to that principle of treat others the way you want to be treated. You know, my parents couldn't articulate that very well just because of a language barrier, but the way they raised us always had that principle in place. It was like, okay, you were an a-hole? Oh man, I wish I could. Yeah, I could curse on this.
Oh yeah.
You being an
Joe
asshole?
Rogan.
You being an asshole? Okay, well, here's what being an asshole is gonna turn out for you. So they would kind of demonstrate that in like real life examples, right? Through discipline and hard-nosed immigrant discipline. I'm not talking about like go to the corner discipline, where that's kind of what we're allowed to do now, right? I mean, you growing up with immigrant parents, you know what it's like.
Yeah. Our father had two, like, I felt like metal fingers that would like stab me in the side of the head. Like whenever I did something wrong, it was like he would just jab it. It was like you were getting hit by like a bat. Or something.
That's nice. At least that's part of his body. It wasn't any foreign objects, right?
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think it comes down to just how our parents brought us up, using that same principle. It was never defined like that, right? Exactly.
So then, and Jen, similar to you, parents pretty structured?
Yeah. I mean, similar. I think even more structured than I would think his parents. I just, when we compare our kids' stories, my parents were pretty strict. So I think you're right. I think you just get it from your parents, right? How your perspective in life. But again, as I said earlier, you know, your perspective in life changes, right? You need to adapt with the environment, and that's how we've kind of adapted to, like, the people management thing. You know, again, our parents are immigrants. How can you people manage properly when you can't communicate properly, right? They tried, don't get me wrong, they probably tried, but we have that advantage of being able to people management. We're able to learn through the language and through our experiences. And like you said, this whole rental and whole real estate business, it's all people management.
How did your parents feel when you told me you're buying your investment property, since they were already investing?
My dad was slightly hesitant because he kind of knew the challenges that he went through. Like, so he kind of has that pain, but he also understood, like, because when I went back to him, we're like, well, do you regret buying it? And you see him kind of think about it, and it's like, you didn't say anything. I'm like, okay, then I know my answer, right? So there's always this barrier that they put up to try to protect us. It's like, hey, you know, you're going to run into problems. A lot of people we talked about, they said, ooh, it's kind of risky. Ooh, this, ooh, that. Like that's comment
friends
saying,
probably.
Yeah. Friends, family, uncles. I had an uncle call me out saying that, you know, it's us type of landlords that are causing the housing problem.
Oh, geez, yeah.
Oh,
you are the problem.
It was a tough chat, right?
Yeah. I think that's just going to increase over the next 10 years. It's any investor who owns properties, you're part of the problem. I always think about that, like Canadian family. So now I'm just talking in general sense. Yep. Canadian family doesn't feel like they can get ahead in their career. They don't sense financial freedom. They're forced into the real estate market, whether they want to or not, because they see hard assets going up. They're forced to buying a triplex, for example, Jason, and dealing with all this stuff. And then they'll be vilified for it as, oh, you're part of the problem because you're an investor buying properties, and, you know, that's causing...
How are you part of the problem when you're helping people find a place to live, right? Yeah. You're giving homes to people to live in.
Yeah.
There's a huge need. There's a demand.
Yeah. Interesting times for sure. And I just think the biggest thing that I see, like, your parents are both immigrants, and I think of my parents, both immigrants here. and they didn't have a big network. Like my father specifically just hung out with other Croatians. Like he spoke Croatian, like he lived in Canada, but it was almost like he lived in Croatia in Canada. You know, he hung out with all different friends, spoke Croatian, you know, only spoke English if he had to like try to like order a pizza somewhere or do something like that. And, but now you guys, the next generation, because this is what I see in myself and Nick, to our kids. So maybe we're not able to match the discipline that our parents gave us, but the different thing that I feel like we're offering our children, if we could give them some discipline, is this network, because they didn't know like think of you guys now. You know paralegals that know the Tenancy Act. You know lawyers. You know bankers. You yourselves are both engineers here. The network that you're bringing to the table for your kids, and if they say, hey, I have a real estate question, well, then you can offer, well, we know Nadim Ahmed. You can talk to Nadim about this. We know Tom Kraz. You can talk to him about this. The value that you're bringing to your kids just from the network that you know, to me, is immeasurable. Because I see that's what's happening to my kids. Because now that they're finishing university, my father I don't even know if he knows where I went to university. You know, so but for my kids finishing, depending on what they want to do in life, I'm like, well, I know this person over in software. I know this person in real estate. I know this person in finance. I know this person in the legal world. So the introductions can be made, and that matters. And to see you guys build your kind of real estate portfolio and make a whole other set of connections that you didn't have, to me, that's of immeasurable value that maybe you don't, I feel like you guys already recognize that, but it gets even more valuable as the years pass on.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%. Yeah, like I said, when my parents came over, they know nobody, right? They had maybe, my parents came over, they had one sister, like my mom's sister was here, and that's all they knew. And again, with the social media, with internet, right? Like, we make it so much easier to find something. You can, you know, Google paralegal, you can Google whatever you want. Back in the day, it's the Yellow Pages, right? Like, that's the only way you can get a contact.
Right. Yellow Pages. Holy smokes, I forgot about the Yellow Pages.
For all the 20-year-olds, that's a physical book.
And when it would come at the end of your driveway, they would just throw it. It was like, oh my gosh, get the Yellow Pages. Don't let the Yellow Pages be thrown out. You needed them, you know?
AAA Rockstar Real Estate?
Yeah.
Get to the very first page.
AAA Pizza?
Yeah.
What is that?
But they're, Jen's totally right? It's, you know, the last 3 years has been such an incredible journey, just kind of going through it, not knowing what to expect, right? And COVID has made this weird opportunity to allow us to connect virtually, where, don't get me wrong, I miss meeting people in person. I mean, I still do, but not to the same scale, because obviously of the things that are happening in our world and our government. But, you know, the chance to be able to just connect with other investors who are kind of going through the same thing, or maybe a few steps before you, or maybe a few steps behind you. Not saying it's a bad thing, but it's giving me that our ability to just say, oh, Tom Karatz on Twitter, oh, he tweets a lot about this Bitcoin, right? But you could message each other and be like, hey, you know, what do you think?
Got a question.
You got a question.
Yeah. Why are you tweeting about it? Would you just stop already?
Yeah. The whole investing community is really open. Like, there's no secrets. There aren't any secrets in real estate that no one's really uncovered. There are some strategies that have been refined through hard work and through trial and error, but there's no secrets out there. It's just a matter of, are you going to do it?
It reflects back on like what we're saying about our immigrant parents coming here and not knowing anything. But now we're getting so many people just joining our brokerage who are just new landed Canadians.
Yeah.
And they're starting out there because they know about us, right?
Yeah,
they know about
it's interesting now to meet new immigrants to Canada who find out about us. And you're like, can you really help us buy a property? And it's like, you just know what's going through their mind and how they don't know people here. And it's fascinating. And we're seeing people arrive in Toronto from all over the world. Like, all different continents are arriving in Canada right now. So interesting times.
I mean, you don't know what you don't know, right? So the fact that someone can just go on YouTube and you go through the rabbit hole of YouTube, and suddenly, you know, Tom Karatz like pops up on YouTube, right? And then you suddenly learn, oh, what's that about? Like, their parents never had that opportunity unless you physically went out to get the information, whether you picked up a phone and called a friend, hey, do you know anything about this? Or do you have a friend who's like, without doing that action, you would never know, right?
Totally.
But now it's just social media, YouTube, watching TV. Like, there's so much information out there that you just pick up on, right?
And the cool thing about us kind of doing, you know, I mean, we've done 3 properties where, you know, it's really easy for us to compare to other investors that have 20 properties, 30 properties, this, that. And it's perspective, right? It's perspective. And when it came down to us talking about like going on this podcast, we're like, oh, what's Tom going to ask us?
Yeah.
Right? Really, it was just about sharing our journey, because that's the whole thing, is that you can take little tidbits from every single person that you meet. Like, I'm not here to share a secret about real estate that other investors ahead of us know or are looking to find out. You know, what I want to take away from this is that, if anything, I want to help my friends.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, if you're going to go on this journey about, you know, wealth and building your dream life, it'd be nice to bring a couple of friends with you.
Totally.
Right?
I have a secret mission that I feel that people that get into real estate, whether we pull them in or not, we're making them or forcing them to be more resilient, more resourceful, and it produces a society that I want to be in.
Mm-hmm.
Because not that you weren't resilient and resourceful before, but there's a whole bunch of new challenges that just got thrown your way.
Yeah.
And if you tackle them all, now you're out there helping other people, and our kind of society around me selfishly, maybe this is a selfish thing now. If there's all these wonderful people like Nadim Ahmed who can tackle anything that comes his way, your family who can tackle anything that comes your way, that's kind of like the society I want to live in, as opposed to people who are not willing to like go out of their comfort zone.
Yeah.
So I have this like ulterior motive somewhat that we never really talk about too much, that real estate is actually a personal development program. That like putting you into real estate
Yep.
is my way. I know this sounds ridiculous,
Yeah,
but
being
it's
uncomfortable.
it's
Yeah.
being uncomfortable. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like, I have a Tony Robbins book here, someone recommended. So it's kind of getting past like the Tony Robbins like seminar version of personal development and pushing you into this and saying, okay, let's see what you got. You know,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, listen, we are engineers, right, by education. And what does the school system teach us, especially engineers? It's like, okay, well, here's the textbook. The information's in the textbook. When it comes out to real life, there's no textbook to life. There's no textbook to all the different types of real estate, even though there are books, but you got to take action. Because, if you're just reading and reading and reading, you've gone through 10 books, and all of a sudden people have just gone out there and did something, and they figured it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I really thank both of you guys. You didn't have to come here. You don't have to share any of this stuff. And I just think that someone's going to listen to this and hear your story, and it's really going to help them. So, and Jason, I want to thank you specifically, because when you found our old website and you didn't get scared off, see the journey that unfolded in front of you, you literally did not judge the book by its cover. That's what you did there, Jason. So thank you. And then for you guys to meet Nadim and you guys to work together, just thank you for all of this. Really, really appreciate it. And sharing your story like you did in the Member of the Month for other Rockstar members to kind of read. It means a lot to us.
Well, thank you for giving us the opportunity to be part of this story, right? Yeah. Without you guys, I don't think we'd be here either. So.
Oh, you would have been here. You would have found something to you guys.
Well, no, it was that fast start class, man. Like.
Yeah. We didn't scare you off.
No.
Thank you so much. Do you guys want to hand out any Instagram handle or anything? Are we leaving that? What are you thinking?
No, so we're open to connecting with other investors, other people who are just interested in getting their journey started as well. So my handle is at Genfah, is JENNFAHH.
And mine's Mr. Jason Kao, so MrJasonkao.
Both on Instagram.
Yeah.
There you go. Thanks to both of you. Nadim Ahmed, thank you. All right, guys. Thanks so much.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. You can find every new episode of the Your Life, Your Term show on all the major streaming platforms. So Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. And if you'd like to get free copies of some of the books that we've put together, like these right here, or some of the reports that we've put together, like these right here, you can find all of those at www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's it for now. Until next time, your life, your terms.